question is very simple. Probably very tough to answer too. Are you heaven bound?
We hope so.
All sorts of answers. I ask that question because so often we get so wrapped up in our society every day. We're running around and everything else. We don't stop and think what's really important. That happened with Zacchaeus that we heard about today. Another tax collector, one we heard from last week. Maybe they should bring those readings around April 15th. But anyhow, this man changed. He changed because he had an encounter with Jesus Christ. A very important encounter. He didn't know Jesus. He heard about him. Short in stature, so what does he do? He climbs a sycamore tree so he can see above all the crowds over there. And who does Jesus call upon? He says, hey, Zacchaeus, come on down. I want to stay at your home. And what happens? All those other people say, look, he's going to the home of a sinner. Where do they think they were coming from? It's amazing how we can point our fingers at other people and accuse them of X, Y, or Z. When we're pointing our finger, don't forget there's 3 fingers pointing back to each of us. Something to think about when we make an accusation. But this happens. It happens constantly. So Zacchaeus' life has changed because of the encounter with Christ. And the same question I think we have to ask ourselves. It varies from person to person. But what happens when you have an encounter with Jesus Christ? Some people might be over, say, in the meditation chapel someday, just quietly sitting there. And Christ talks to them. It could be in your own home. It doesn't make any difference where it is. But Christ does speak to us. We have to listen. And if we're having that encounter with Christ, we should be changing our lives. Changing the way we look at things, and particularly the way you and I look at one another. The people we encounter day after day. See, life is a challenge. But Christ is, in all his goodness, has a purpose for every single one of us sitting in this room today. Now that purpose is going to end one day. And too often, if you take a look around and look in the newspapers and so forth, particularly the obituary page, and you take a good look, and you try that right here in Phoenix, there are not a lot of older people dying. There are some, yes. But look at the ages. I'm overcome every time I pick up that paper, every time they have an obituary. I go through there and see people in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. And I say, why? What's going on? But then I stop and think, you know, maybe they fulfilled their purpose and God took them home. Could be. Because I think we all have a purpose in life. Every single one of us. We may not fully understand what it is, but once we become aware of it, we try to live it out. Maybe it means trying to support others, or forgiving people, or having mercy for people. It could be 1,000 things. Everyone's here has a purpose. And when we complete that, the Lord's going to say, come on home. I really believe that. So it takes longer for some of us to get to that reason than others. My mother died at 98, so it took quite a few years for her. But I think it's true. You stop and look at your lives. And God has a purpose for you. And some of you have realized that. You become aware of that. And when we become aware of that, when we have that encounter with Christ, it means we change. We change for the positive, not the negative. We change for the positive. We start looking at people with different eyes and different thinking. Everything about us changes. And that's among all of us. But we have to open this little heart of ours so we can let Christ in and speak to us, so we can hear him calling us day after day to something better. Yes, it's a challenge. It's a big challenge. But God gives you the grace. He put you here. You're his people. You're his people, every one of us. God has placed every single one of you here. That's why you're so important. You may look upon yourself and not think that, but you are. You're important in his sight, and If it doesn't make any difference what other people think, that's what's important, is that God looks upon me, loves me, because he has placed me here on this earth to evangelize. Whatever else I have to do. That's our responsibility. All the other stuff takes second place, or third, or whatever. But the point is, you're special. And you don't stop and look at that. None of us do. Hey, I'm special. I got to do something for God. He's given me the very breath I'm breathing at this very moment. That's a gift. What do we do? What do we give back to God? He gives us life. What are we giving back to him? And his wonderful generosity to each and every one of us. What do we give back? Do we give love, mercy, forgiveness? You are the only ones who can answer that. And if we want to be heaven-bound, then we have to change our lives. Because you don't know, and I don't know, when the Lord's going to come along and pull us out and say, come on home, you've done your job. It's a challenge, isn't it? So I ask you, my brothers and sisters, like Zacchaeus, let's be aware of our own selves, our own faults, our own sins, and all that. Because God will forgive us. He's going to say, throw that guy away. No. He forgives us. Providing we are sorry as well for our faults and our failings. So you've got a loving God. What more do you want? He's given you life. Give that life back to your brothers and sisters in the way in which you and I treat them day after day.